Welcome to the fifth video of my Java MTA course. Do remember this is the sixth part, and we're going to be focusing a lot on OOP and how classes are created and communicate with each other. In this video we're going to be talking a little bit more about the overloading basics, and so as always I'm going to be giving you the key points that you need for the exam very quickly, and then throwing some questions at you to see if it can cement the information. So let's get started. The key points that you need to remember for the MTA exam is that overloading allows you to call the same method in a class even though it sends different amounts of data. So what happens is that you can have multiple constructors or multiple methods, but each method has a slightly different method signature. So if you think of your class as a fountain and the water is the data that is being entered into your constructor or your method. Well, let's say the first layer of that fountain is the first constructor. Now, maybe there will be too much data into that first constructor, so you'll make a second constructor. So if a lot more data than you realize is entered into this constructor and it overloads that constructor, then the water will go down, or the data will go down, and it will go into the second constructor, or the code will use the second constructor to make the instance. So how does that reflect real life? Well, if you imagine you're inputting data as for customers, and you have one customer and their name is John Smith, they have an age, they have a telephone number, but they have no email. You want to put that in and create a customer with your customer objects or your customer class. Now you have the second customer. It has a name, he has a age, he doesn't have a phone number, but he has an email. So do you make a second class for different customers, or do you make one class that has different constructors? So for example, and then the third one, imagine you have customer 3, you have a name, you have a number or an age, but you don't have a number and you don't have an email. So you can see how the data that will be entered in will be different in each of these instances. So how will that look in the code? Well, you have this code, and this code will have 3 constructors. They'll say, hey, look, if it only has one piece of information that's added, like the name, well, then we'll use the first constructor. If there's 2 pieces of data that's added, then the first one will be overloaded, and it will go down to the second constructor. We'll have 2. And again, if there is 3 pieces of data, the second constructor will be overloaded, and it will go down to the third one. So depending on what information is added, or depending on what is the method signature here, will depend on what constructor you use. So again, I'm going to throw some questions at you. This is a lot of information, and let's see if we can cement that information. Okay, so here's the code. This is our class. We have a customer class, and we have one constructor, because we know it's a constructor because it's the same name. If you're confused about what a constructor is, then I would suggest you watching my video on Java constructors. We have the second constructor here, and again we know it's because it's the same name, but if you look, the method signatures are different because that only has one value in. This has 2 arguments here. And then we have the third constructor. Again, the method signature is different because we have 3 constructors there, or 3 arguments there. So knowing this code, let's see if you can answer these questions. So stop the video and see if you can answer them. Hopefully you've stopped the video. Let's go through the answers. So we have our instance here, and which constructor will be used? Well, we have one argument here, one parameter. If we look at our constructors that we have available, this matches up with this constructor method signature. So we would use the first constructor to initialize, or to create an object, of this instance, or to create this instance. What value will be stored in the address in the instance above? Well, if we look here, we have this dot address, so that will be our address property, and at the moment we will set this at none, so it will be none because we're using the first constructor. If you wanted to add a new class property called tellNumber, how would you use overloading to allow the instance to add the value? So what I would do is first I would declare the class property up there. So I wouldn't set the value up here, I would just declare it. And if you don't know what declare means, I would have a look at the this keyword video, and this will help you understand a little bit more about what declare means in Java and for the MTA exam. So I declare this class property, and then I would add a new constructor, and remember that constructor has to have the same name as the class, but it needs to have a different method signature to the other constructors. So I would probably add the new argument tellNumber into my constructor. This is a slightly more difficult one. We've got again another class called customer. What I would like you to do is pause the video and see if you can answer these questions. So hopefully we have paused the video. So in the code, have we done overloading to the constructor or to a method? So if we look here, we've got one constructor. Do we have another one? No, we don't. So we have not done any overloading to a constructor. But what about a method? So we've got the first method here, order, the second method here, order. So it's the same name. Does it have a different method signature? Well, we got three of them, and they are all different. So this one and this one is different because we have different arguments. These are different because one has a return type of float and has a lot more arguments. So we have done overloading in our method. We've created two extra methods that will overload the first one. Which line of code will be executed if I wrote the code below? Okay, so we've created our instance called Fred, and then we're calling this method. This method has no arguments in. So because it's having no arguments, it will call this method. And so what will be outputted is there are no orders. So that will be outputted for number 2. What line of code will be executed if I wrote this code below, and what will be outputted? Again, what we have is we have three values that will be inserted into the method, and what we're expecting is we're expecting a float back from the method because we're putting it into a variable. So knowing this information, we know it can't be this one because it doesn't have 3 arguments in the method signature, and it's got a void, which means there's nothing going to be returned. The last one though, we know that the return type is going to be a float, which matches up here, and we know 1, 2, 3, there are 3 arguments. So what will be outputted is here. So let's say you have bought the amount, so we have bought 5 bikes. It's actually 5 bike, it wouldn't have bikes because I haven't put the S on there. So that should say you have bought 5 bike, and then it will return the price. What line of code will be executed if I wrote the code below? Again, if we get rid of this, it's all about looking at the method signature. We're not expecting anything to be returned, and we've got one argument, one parameter there. So if we look at our methods, remember they could all be order. The only one with one argument is this one, and it will be you have bought 1 bike. So hopefully you've learned a lot in the video. There was a lot to cover there. If you are able to understand how you overload a method, I think you have a good understanding of this video. If you are able to define what overloading is, if you're able to do these two, I think you're capable of answering questions in the MTA exam for this topic. An interesting one that maybe you can investigate: can you overload? Can one of the overloaded methods be static? So if you can answer that, leave a comment below. If you found this useful, and if you want to continue learning with me, please subscribe to the channel to support my videos. So I'll see you next time. Goodbye.